Hello, Halloween forum friends. I go by Dexter Sinister on the forums, and like many of you, I have an old Chauvet Hurricane with a bad pump. Here's a Chauvet Hurricane. I got this used and hoped it might work, and it didn't. And so I disassembled it. I looked online on the forums, tried to see if anybody had any good pump fixing tips, and didn't really find a whole lot. So I decided I'd tear the thing apart myself and see what I could do. I made one attempt, it didn't work very well, and I was about to junk the thing, and I said, well, I'm going to go deeper into it and see what I can do. And I got lucky, it works, and hopefully this will work for you. So I assume that you have the ability to take a screwdriver and pull the housing off the top like I've done, and we'll go from there. So of course I've unbolted the pump here. I left one screw in, and I will just undo that so that we can get to this thing. I'll edit out the slow bits when the slow bits are in the video. Alright, so now that pump is loose. I'm going to trust that if you're working with this, you've got it unplugged, because most of the electricity in here is 120 volt household current, so I highly recommend that you work with it unplugged, or if you're going to plug it in for testing, that you find somebody who knows what they're doing. So we're going to unscrew this copper tubing going into the pump. You can loosen up the one back here next to the heater, and you can bend it out of the way like that. The other one that you need to do is this big one here that is the inlet hose to the pump. There, so I've done that. I'm making a wet mess here on the thing. So then you've got one electrical piece here which goes to the solenoid inside of the pump, and that will come loose shortly. Then this fitting here that the copper tubing connects to, the discharge of the pump, you can unscrew that. And pull that out. And then what we have here is some sort of a check valve. If you'll zoom in on that, there's a little rubber tippy on top of that, and a spring that it sits on like so. And that goes up inside of this brass piece, and you can't see it very well. There's a small hole, and that is some sort of a check valve, I think, but I'm not entirely sure. There's a metal washer that sits against on this housing. That housing covers this solenoid. And that's where the electricity is that makes the pump go up and down inside of there. And then there's a little small, I don't know what you would call it, a little shoulder piece that sits on top of there, fits inside of that solenoid. We'll set that there. And then there's sort of this base that the solenoid rests on. We'll unscrew that, 3 screws. Set those aside. And so then we have the pump. And I have had this apart. I haven't gone into this my first attempt. I pulled this off, which I believe is some sort of pressure regulator or something. I pulled this out and cleaned out, and I pulled this, which I think adjusts flow or pressure or something, but I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not entirely sure I've got it back at the right setting. But there you go. This is where the blue hose went in, and there's an O-ring there to help seal that. I think when I started playing with this, I sort of assumed that there was like some soft, you can look up here, some sort of soft component, washers, gaskets, or something that were failing, and that's why it was leaking by or not working. But I don't think that's actually the case. Most of the gaskets, seal the thing up, but they're not actually part of the moving pump action. So then, if you look here, the pump is actually inside of this cylinder. There's what looks like, I don't know, snap ring or something. There's two little slots, and if you had the right tool, you could get it in there. A pair of needle nose pliers would do it. That's what I've got here. And this thing is not actually screwed in, but you can use it to sort of break loose the thing in there. The pump from the housing, and that slides out. So then what you have is the housing here for the pump. It's got 2 O-rings on it, and there's not much to see inside. There's a spring on the top of it, and this is the actual sort of pumping mechanism. There's a spring on top and a spring below that this goes on, and this sort of oscillates between these 2 springs, and I think that's the actual pumping mechanism. Then if you look down in here, you've got this little brass cylinder, and you might take a needle nose plier or something else and just kind of jiggle it. I'm going to use my finger. I really don't want to scratch it up too much or bend it up, but I can do that. And you can pull that out, and then that looks like this here. It's kind of got a sleeve or something in the middle of it, and yeah. And then in the very inside down there, there is another O-ring that seals against. Let's see if I can get that out again. There we go. And there it is. And so what I think is happening with this pump is that this sort of cheap pot metal that the base of it is built out of is corroding. And when I pulled it apart the first time, the sleeve kind of had a lot of that stuff sort of stuck onto it, as did this shaft that kind of goes in there. And so this I think is sort of is acting like a bearing, not a rolling bearing, but a pump bearing up and down. And I cleaned that off with a wire brush and took a little, oh, what do they call that stuff? I can't remember now. It's sort of like a sandpaper cloth, and went through the inside with like a skinny tool, and kind of sanded that out so that would move smoothly. And then, even though I've cleaned this out, it already looks kind of a little gunky. It's just this junk from this pump kind of just corroding. And I don't know that there's any way around that. I'm not sure what the better cleaning methods are. Some people use vinegar, some people use just water to store it, or some people use the fancy cleaning fluids, and I don't have strong opinion or experience with that yet. But so I've cleaned that out, and I'm going to reassemble it. Where'd that O-ring go? There it is. And when I reassembled it, I used just a little bit of just what I happen to have around, which is in this case a white lithium grease. But if I found a silicone grease, I would do that just to help maybe keep the O-rings from drying out, or help them seal a little better, maybe provide a little lubrication. So that little O-ring goes right inside there, in the bottom. I can do this. There we go. Push that in nicely. And then if you look at this, I didn't actually pay that close attention when I pulled it out, but I believe there's sort of a thicker piece there and a skinnier piece on one end, and they look about the same size, but I believe that this thicker sort of shoulder goes in with the O-ring. So that just slides in there like that. Can you see that closely? Good light. And the larger of these springs goes on there, and you can kind of tell that that's kind of got gray. It's got some of that corrosion on there. Sits on top of that. The sort of pump mechanism, that shaft goes in there through the brass sleeve, so that's a little spring action there. You can't even hear it doing its thing. Another spring goes inside on top. Let's see what was next. And this is sort of the outer casing of what's actually the pump. It's got 2 O-rings on it. And that you just press in. There's not any screwing to do. Then what did I do? Let's see. Oh, from there, then this plate goes on first. Because if you don't, then you won't be able to get the other piece on. You see okay? Not in my shoulders, not in the way. right. And then, let's see, this sort of piece that goes underneath the solenoid, and the solenoid has a little slot for that on the bottom, fits over that. This small spring and this, what I think is a check valve, but I'm not entirely sure, that fits inside of there, fits into that little hole, and then this brass cap goes over that whole piece and threads in inside of the solenoid. Oh, wait a minute, back up. You guys caught that if you were paying attention. The cover for the solenoid, and there's a little rubber grommet to help sort of seal that a little bit. Strain relief, I think, for the wire. Then this little washer, and then the spring with the check valve. And I'll just do that again. Spring, valve, brass cap, threads in. Tighten that up. All right. And then I could pull these off. I don't think that's really the main problem, but you can pull those out and you can clean out what's inside of them. And like I said, this one at least has an adjustment on it, and I don't know. So if you do it, you can pay attention to sort of where it's at, and if you unscrew it and clean it out and put it back in, you can try to get it into the same position. All right, oh, wait a sec, that goes that orientation. Where's that? Did I get that in the wrong spot? Oh, I see. Let's loosen this up. All right, so the solenoid, of course, can spin in there, so you can get this oriented so it fits well. You set it into the mounting holes, and that's turned around, so let's turn it around again. There, so the blue inlet hose will go there, and the wire going into the solenoid's there. It just keeps it all nice and neat. And then if you go to test this and you want to like connect it or disconnect it or whatever, in my previous experience, I've found that this heater gets very hot, which is not surprising. But then when I went to go sort of connect and disconnect this copper tubing, I was a little surprised at how far up this copper tubing the heat traveled and stayed even after a period of time. So I had disconnected and I was playing with the pump and testing to see whether anything was coming out, and I tried to reconnect it. Anyway, that can stay very hot, so be careful, don't burn your fingers on that like I did. And then I can, well, let's tell you what, before I do that, let's go ahead and mount this pump. 2 screws there. Alright, so now the pump is mounted back onto the frame of the fogger, and I'm going to screw in the hose coupling there. Alright, that's nice and tight. I'll put the pump discharge connection on, tighten that up. And then I will tighten up the inlet to the heater here just to make sure I get tightened up, because I did loosen it a little. There, and we put it back together, at least enough to test it. So, is it recording? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, there you go. We have an operating fog machine where the pump was previously not doing anything except making a buzzing noise. And the buzzing noise, I think, is what you get when it's dry, but it may also sort of do that if there's fluid in it and it's not pumping. It was doing that for me. Your mileage may vary. I think I'll stop clogging up the garage. So there you go. I'd like to thank my camera person who goes by the name of Moondragon, and you can look for her stuff on DeviantArt. She makes cute little polymer clay dragons and does some drawings. She goes by Moondragon-1 if you look on DeviantArt. And you may have seen her wearing the articulated wings that we made for her 2 years ago for Halloween. So I will put this up, and I'll put up some still pictures of the parts, and I can try to answer any questions if you have them if you post to the forum, halloweenforum.com. I'm Dexter Sinister. I guess you can call this Dexter's Dungeon. Thanks, bye.